Section 5.1, Overview of Photosynthesis. By the end of this section, you will be able to summarize the process of photosynthesis, explain the relevance of photosynthesis to other living things, identify the reactants and products of photosynthesis, and describe the main structures involved in photosynthesis. All living organisms on Earth consist of one or more cells. Each cell runs on the chemical energy found mainly in carbohydrate molecules, food, and the majority of these molecules are produced by one process, photosynthesis. Through photosynthesis, certain organisms convert solar energy, or sunlight, into chemical energy, which is then used to build carbohydrate molecules. The energy used to hold these molecules together is released when an organism breaks down food. Cells then use this energy to perform work, such as cellular respiration. The energy that is harnessed from photosynthesis enters the ecosystem of our planet continuously and is transferred from one organism to another. Therefore, directly or indirectly, the process of photosynthesis provides most of the energy required by living things on Earth. Photosynthesis also results in the release of oxygen into the atmosphere. In short, to eat and breathe, humans depend almost entirely on the organisms that carry out photosynthesis. Solar dependence and food production. Some organisms can carry out photosynthesis, whereas others cannot. An autotroph is an organism that can produce its own food. The Greek roots of the word autotroph mean self, auto, and feeder, troph. Plants are the best known autotrophs, but others exist, including certain types of bacteria and algae. Oceanic algae contribute enormous quantities of food and oxygen to global food chains. Plants are also photoautotrophs, a type of autotroph that uses sunlight and carbon from carbon dioxide to synthesize chemical energy in the form of carbohydrates. All organisms carrying out photosynthesis require sunlight. Figure 5.2. A. Plants, B. Algae, and C. Certain bacteria, called cyanobacteria, are photoautotrophs that can carry out photosynthesis. Algae can grow over enormous areas in water, at times completely covering the surface. Heterotrophs are organisms incapable of photosynthesis that must therefore obtain energy and carbon from food by consuming other organisms. The Greek roots of the word heterotroph mean other, hetero, and feeder, troph, meaning that their food comes from other organisms. Even if the food organism is another animal, this food traces its origins back to autotrophs and the process of photosynthesis. Humans are heterotrophs, as are all animals. Heterotrophs depend on autotrophs either directly or indirectly. Deer and wolves are heterotrophs. A deer obtains energy by eating plants. A wolf eating a deer obtains energy that originally came from the plants eaten by that deer. The energy in the plant came from photosynthesis and therefore is the only autotroph in this example. Using this reasoning, all food eaten by humans also links back to autotrophs that carry out photosynthesis. Figure 5.3. The energy stored in carbohydrate molecules from photosynthesis passes through the food chain. The predator that eats these deer is getting energy that originated in the photosynthetic vegetation that the deer consumed. Everyday connection. Photosynthesis at the grocery store. Figure 5.4. Photosynthesis is the origin of the products that comprise the main elements of the human diet. Major grocery stores in the United States are organized into departments such as dairy, meats, produce, bread, cereals, and so forth. Each aisle contains hundreds, if not thousands, of different products for customers to buy and consume. Although there is a large variety, each item links back to photosynthesis. Meat and dairy products link to photosynthesis because the animals were fed plant-based foods. The breads, cereals, and pastas come largely from grains, which are the seeds of photosynthetic plants. What about desserts and drinks? All of these products contain sugar, the basic carbohydrate molecule produced directly from photosynthesis. The photosynthesis connection applies to every meal and every food a person consumes. Main structures and summary of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis requires sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water as starting reactants. After the process is complete, photosynthesis releases oxygen and produces carbohydrate molecules, most commonly glucose. These sugar molecules contain the energy that living things need to survive. Figure 5.5. Photosynthesis uses solar energy, carbon dioxide, and water to release oxygen and to produce energy-storing sugar molecules. The complex reactions of photosynthesis can be summarized by the chemical equation shown in Figure 5.6. Figure 5.6. The process of photosynthesis can be represented by an equation wherein carbon dioxide and water produce sugar and oxygen using energy from sunlight. Although the equation looks simple, the many steps that take place during photosynthesis are actually quite complex, as in the way that the reactions summarizing cellular respiration represented many individual reactions. Before learning the details of how photoautotrophs turn sunlight into food, it is important to become familiar with the physical structures involved. In plants, photosynthesis takes place primarily in leaves, which consist of many layers of cells and have differentiated top and bottom sides. The process of photosynthesis occurs not on the surface layers of the leaf, but rather in a middle layer called the mesophyll. The gas exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen occurs through small, regulated openings called stomata. In all autotrophic eukaryotes, photosynthesis takes place inside an organelle called a chloroplast. In plants, chloroplast-containing cells exist in the mesophyll. Chloroplasts have a double, inner and outer, membrane. Within the chloroplast is a third membrane that forms stacked, disc-shaped structures called thylakoids. Embedded in the thylakoid membrane are molecules of chlorophyll, a pigment, a molecule that absorbs light, through which the entire process of photosynthesis begins. Chlorophyll is responsible for the green color of plants. The thylakoid membrane encloses an internal space called the thylakoid space. Other types of pigments are also involved in photosynthesis, but chlorophyll is by far the most important. As shown in Figure 5.7, a stack of thylakoids is called a granum, and the space surrounding the granum is called stroma, not to be confused with stomata, the openings on the leaves. Figure 5.7. Not all cells of a leaf carry out photosynthesis. Cells within the middle layer of a leaf have chloroplasts, which contain the photosynthetic apparatus. The two parts of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in two stages, the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. In the light-dependent reactions, which take place at the thylakoid membrane, chlorophyll absorbs energy from sunlight and then converts it into chemical energy with the use of water. The light-dependent reactions release oxygen from the hydrolysis of water as a byproduct. In the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma, the chemical energy derived from the light-dependent reactions drives both the capture of carbon in carbon dioxide molecules and the subsequent assembly of sugar molecules. The two reactions use carrier molecules to transport the energy from one to the other. The carriers that move energy from the light-dependent reactions to the Calvin cycle reactions can be thought of as full because they bring energy. After the energy is released, the empty energy carriers return to the light-dependent reactions to obtain more energy. The two-stage, two-location photosynthesis process was discovered by Joan Mary Anderson, whose continuing work over the subsequent decades provided much of our understanding of the process, the membranes, and the chemicals involved.